Would you raise your hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please state your full name?
I'm Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in Virgin Islands.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
What was the crime of which you were convicted?
Two counts, one soliciting prostitution and procuring a minor for prostitution.
In this YouTube video, we're going to be discussing the inherent nature of the case of Jeffrey Epstein and his atrocities of human trafficking. With the recent release in the whole Epstein files that have been redacted, we're going to take this case and expand upon it in a different way. In the files that you can actually see that have been uploaded and have recently been redacted, you would actually start to notice that there are a lot of associations which are not really expanded upon or being protected. So in this manner, we're going to take a different way, and we're going to see the most inherent or most popular association, which is his association with Donald Trump, basically. And if we analyze the character of Donald Trump, he's a man who inherently got real estate and amassed a fortune from his father, expanding his whole real estate influence, where eventually he delved into politics, acquiring more and more power. So with this inherent connection with Donald Trump, you would actually see an individual who has acclaimed power, basically, in the world, power or success that is generally objectively classified by society. And with this power, this would be the ability to influence, the ability to acquire things, the ability to buy and finance things. And with his connection with Jeffrey Epstein, this is inherently a symbolic connection which we can take, which definitely isn't really tied to any sort of conspiracy theories, which isn't the purpose of this video, but just a general analysis through it. So if we take it, there's usually a word with elites. And if we define this word that we find with elites, these would be individuals who have acclaimed some sort of level of success or power in the world. And these vary from political to business to artistic to entertainment to creative, or so on and so forth. And there are various avenues in which individuals can actually acclaim. And with these inherent avenues, which individuals can start to acclaim power, you would actually start to notice that they're always interconnected, which is basically networking with each other. And as they are connected with each other, you'd actually there would be sort of speculation on the inherent case, just like we would actually see with Donald Trump, as well as any other celebrities that, was associated with the Epstein files. And within these Epstein files, you would actually see, basically nothing more than speculation, because the case or the inherent narrative behind it doesn't really expand upon it, or doesn't really objectively state why, who, or where, or what happened to actually allow this. So we're going to take a different route with that. We're going to explore the inherent why this happened. And as we explore the why this happened with rich, powerful, influential individuals and their fascination with all that is, perverse to objective society standards, we would actually get a deeper rooted understanding on why this actually does happen. So if we actually try to understand why these sort of individuals who have all the influence, power, or whatever they could or inherently desire would want to, enact in these kind of horrors, we would actually start to understand something which isn't really talked about as often, or has been talked about but mainstream or societal conventions don't actually expand upon it. So with these inherent horrors, we would actually find philosophy expanding upon them and detailing how they are in actual fact alignment with nature. And when you actually see these individuals enact in these kind of things such as pedophilia or human sex trafficking, you would actually find something inherently inhumane, something that transcends not in the objective standards. You could even say submerged. Submerged would be much better in explaining this kind of behavior, something that does not seem inherently rational. And this irrational actions that we usually see are found in nature, and they are defined basically in the expression of creativity. What you see with these kind of individuals who have acclaimed some sort of influence in whatever they desire, they inherently all possess a form of genius or a form of creativity. The expression of this genius is inherently ambivalent or inherently amoral in expression. And with this expression, it can be used for either positive endeavors or negative endeavors. So what we see with these kind of individuals who have acclaimed any sort of success, any sort of acclaim, they would actually start to delve within their creative libido, if we could say that, their inherent libido, and we would actually see them delve into the darker aspects of their libido to actually be satisfied, to access this inherent inhumane nature of themselves, to access this creative source that they want to acquire, yet is being expressed in a way that is not, well, basically correct, or that is basically harmful. A great way to actually see this kind of action in real or creative ways is through the film of Dexter.
You give me the fucking creeps. You know that, Dexter?
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that.
Fuck you.
So within Dexter, we basically find, well, a blood analyst who's trying to, well, murder people. But he has a code, basically, to actually only murder other murderers. So it would be a sort of vigilanteism. But in this way, even though he does cause harm to other people, this sort of action doesn't really come from some moralistic perspective, which is usually seen in, let's say, for example, superhero movies or traumatic experiences. These would come from an inherent desire that he's cultivated within himself, and he's tried to control and channel in a positive and correct way that is within who he is and who, well, his nature is. And he seems obviously normal. That's the weird thing. From an objective outside perspective, he seems like a normal person who does good things and does his job and nothing else. But behind that surface, behind what everyone sees, behind his persona, we would actually see something inherently very much more darker. And this darker nature would actually be something that wants to act in a way that is not socially conventional or socially correct. And this would require some sort of dichotomy, some sort of split in the persona to actually not express it in a way that, well, they can. So if you have a sort of desire that is part of your nature and you can express it in the way that you really want to, what would you actually have to do? Well, in Dexter, he actually still murders people, but, well, basically in secret. So if you're an influential individual with all success that has an instinctive desire that is part of your nature that cannot really be expressed socially in a, well, healthy way, then the only thing that can happen is for you to express it in secret. And we find this also in the film of, well, Eyes Wide Shut.
Dressed?
Remove your clothes.
In Eyes Wide Shut, we're introduced to Bill Harford, a successful individual who is basically a doctor. But he's not uber successful to the point where he can actually join these social circle, so to say. So Bill actually gets curious as he's going through his whole marital problems to try to understand what and why he's experiencing, well, what he's experiencing, or to see what he wants to see. He essentially goes over the rainbow, which is an analogy that goes back to, well, seeing something that's behind the veil. The movie was actually adapted from Trom Novel, which describes this whole scenario of dreamlike. And what we see in this kind of dreamlike nature of the film, when he actually starts to infiltrate this social circle and try to actually see what these individuals express naturally, he would actually see the inherent horrors of human nature, which is raw, powerful, and some might even say demonic in its expression, to actually have it fulfilled, which society cannot actually compensate or accept, and which nature itself has implanted in these sort of individuals. So, by the end of Trom Novel, or Eyes Wide Shut in this scenario, he essentially leaves the ball, or masked ball, and he's consumed by a sense of paranoia at what he has seen. And he wants to understand, but he can't, and yet it is completely engulfing him. Essentially, the whole film is a representation of a dreamlike experience, and we, the audience, are experiencing it. So if we go back to Jeffrey Epstein, the inherent nature of elite or individuals who have acclaimed some sort of success that need to express this inherent desire but can't control it in a way that society would find acceptable, so do actions which are secretive in nature, we would actually find this whole realization dreamlike, in the expression that it does not seem true, it does not seem even real, that the possibility of such a thing could happen because of the adaptation and the social norms which we would actually have to see. And even though this is an actual real phenomenon, and we actually do see it in sort of films that try to express this concept which is not easily grasped, it's the same as waking up in the morning after a dream. You have this sense vague of something happening, of something having meaning, but you can't put your finger on it. You can't really understand what or why something is happening. Which brings us back to the philosophers who had already seen this sort of kind of behavior within their societies at their current time. So to explain the inherent psychology of these individuals, the inherent nature that characterizes them so deeply, we could go back all the way down in history, and we would actually find various examples, such as in Justine, The Misfortunes of Virtue by Marquise de Sade, who was obviously of a interesting character. He quotes, "There is a sum of evil equal to the sum of good. The containing equilibrium of the world requires that there be as many good people as wicked." And here he is expressing a concept which is an inherent characteristic of nature, where it requires this sort of equilibrium, it requires this sort of balancing act. And he is not alone in his whole judgment and observation of nature and its actions. We would actually see this also in the book of The Torture Garden by Octave Mirabeau. He gives insightful characteristics of what philosophers had already known all the way back before these kind of scenarios were made public or were introduced to the modern world, which is highly constrained in its expressions. So he gives a quote, monsters, monsters, but there are no monsters. What you call monsters are superior forms, or forms beyond your understanding. Aren't the gods monsters? Isn't a man of genius a monster, like a tiger or a spider, like all individuals who live beyond social ties and the dazzling and divine immortality of things? Why, I too then am a monster. And he goes on in another instance to explain why this dreamlike characteristic which we all experience in the face of the horrors of nature are: you are forced to pretend outward respect for people and institutions which you find ridiculous. You remain cowardly, attached to moral or social conventions you despise, condemn, and which you lack all foundation. It's the permanent contradiction between your ideas and the desires on one hand, and all the dead forms and vain phantoms of your civilization on the other, that makes you sad, troubled, and unbalanced. In that intolerable conflict, you lose all joy of life and all feeling of personality, because every moment the free play of your strength is restrained, impeded, and checked. That's the poisonous and wound of the civilized world. So what these philosophers are trying to understand, and what we can see through the artwork of William Blake, is this whole cyclical nature, the cyclical pattern of nature, and its requirement of equilibrium, and its requirement of all that is beautiful must have also that which is horrifying. And something that is inherently horrifying is something that nature really uses to reach this inherent sense of equilibrium. And if we understand that all these horrors that we always seem so dreamlike is because of the unconscious influence that nature has within the human psyche. Even though the development of civilization has brought us here, these influences are inherently within our unconscious, and because they are unconscious, they influence us to act in ways which we do not understand and which follow its inherent patterns. Jeffrey Epstein, in his role within the whole pattern of nature, was an expression to satisfy it in a destructive or very harmful manner. And the reason why it seems so surreal on why something like this would even happen is because of the laws or the characteristics of nature which society does not, will not, and will never try to understand or accept, which all philosophers have always tried to express and try to make evident. So with all of that said, what can we do? Do we just submit to the horrors of nature which inherently influence us? Do we just admit that nature is just a cyclical feeding ground which tries to devour every single one of us through our own desires? What the philosophers try to tell us, well, those beyond nihilism, obviously, is that we can transcend this influence, we can overcome this influence, and we can control our actions to be more in accordance with what we all desire in a way that inherently is good for all. And if by the end of this video you get a semblance of feeling this idea that you've kind of woken up from a dream, and that this dream may in fact be a little bit of a nightmare, you would have understood the feeling that philosophers had all the way back when they had these sort of realizations on the inherent nature of society. And as the modern world is actually moving towards more and more of what they call a voluptuous nature, you yourself would need to become aware of these influences and act accordingly to what you would need or what you would want for your life. And that would be the way to actually handle these sort of horrors of life in a way that benefits you and allows you to overcome them. Yeah, this one was pretty long, gosh damn it. But I really hope that you guys liked this one. This one was really out there. Kind of had to do a little bit of research for that, but yeah, hope you liked it. Peace.